Looking to ski or ride in South America and coming from the Northern Hemisphere, Valle Nevado is almost the default choice. With access through several North American mega passes in an iconic high alpine base village, Valle Nevado is the exotic destination that adventurous ski resort goers would picture on a postcard. But just because Valle Nevado looks the part doesn't necessarily make it perfect. So is this central Chile ski resort right for you? Well, in this video, we'll go through Valle Nevado's overall mountain experience, and then we'll go through how the resort stacks up in our overall rankings. Let's jump right into it. Valle Nevado spans 1,939 acres, or 785 hectares, from boundary to boundary. This makes it one of the largest ski resorts in the Southern Hemisphere, and the largest lift-served ski resort by acreage measurement in Chile. The entire footprint sits above treeline, offering wide-open alpine skiing and riding with minimal natural obstacles. Although, like most other South American resorts, areas outside the marked trails are not directly patrolled or avalanche controlled. With a low point of 9,383 feet and a base village at 9,925 feet, Valle Nevado holds the distinction of having the highest base elevation in the Southern Hemisphere. This altitude helps contribute to favorable skiing and riding conditions, but it also presents a real challenge for visitors not acclimated to high elevations. Even compared to most North American and European resorts, the Valle Nevado base is exceptionally high, and with Santiago sitting more than 7,000 feet below the resort village, there's no good midway stopping ground to acclimate to this elevation. Even if you think you're used to this type of skiing and riding, be ready to drink lots of water and take more frequent breaks than usual. When it comes to the terrain layout, Valle Nevado is primarily divided into two zones. A front side that covers nearly the full vertical drop and is serviced by both a gondola and high-speed quad, both of which are uncommon luxuries in South America, and a higher elevation backside which is accessed almost entirely by platter lifts. The Embalse double chair provides limited egress back to the front side from part of this terrain, although it tends to operate on an inconsistent schedule. Despite surrounding Andean peaks that top out well above 17,000 feet, Valle Nevado's lift-served elevation tops out at 12,041 feet. While the resort advertises a 2,658-foot vertical drop, only about 2,000 of these feet are realistically skiable in one continuous run. The highest terrain lies on the backside and requires either another lift to return to the front side or a long, often tiring catwalk. The easiest terrain at Valle Nevado is rated with the green circle, and this level of run is primarily concentrated in the lower and mid-mountain areas. While the resort does offer a handful of green runs, the overall selection is somewhat limited. About half of the green trails are more like traverses than full runs. They aren't too flat to maintain momentum, but they're narrow and not particularly engaging to lap repeatedly. Less experienced skiers and riders might find themselves running out of terrain quickly if they don't progress to higher ability zones within a few days. The true learning zone, which is located on the lower mountain, is decent. It has a magic carpet, a surface lift, and a double chair, and it's a step up from some South America resorts that start beginners on T-bars or platter lifts. Valle Nevado transforms into a much more practical mountain at the low intermediate level, with blue runs accessible from every lift. For those transitioning from beginner terrain, these trails are generally on the easier side compared to blue runs at many other resorts. However, a significant number of them, especially in the upper mountain, function more as flat catwalks connecting different resort zones than as true cruising terrain. The worst offenders are Camino El Torte, which links the Cima Mirador lift to the upper surface lifts, and Camino Alto, which connects Cima Inca to the lower mountain. Many of these runs are flat enough that we'd probably classify them as greens, but we imagine they're likely rated as blues simply because additional blue level trails are required to navigate further down the mountain. That said, there are a few genuinely enjoyable blue cruisers on offer, and they provide some of the best views anywhere on the mountain. Unlike ski resorts in the United States and Canada, Valle Nevado has a trail rating between the blue square and black diamond, the red triangle. This rating is designed for trails that are advanced in nature, although most guests will find them to be about equivalent to harder blues at a typical North American destination ski resort. These runs make up the bulk of Valle Nevado's marked footprint, and multiple reds can be found off every mid and upper mountain lift. A small handful of reds remain ungroomed throughout the ski season, but most are consistently groomed. Valle Nevado's steepest consistently maintained trails are marked with a black diamond rating. However, this overall offering is limited. Only 6 single black runs exist, all above mid-mountain, and while marketed by the resort as quote-unquote expert trails, they aren't any harder than a typical single black advanced run at a North American ski resort. About half of these runs are groomed on a regular basis, while the others are left to build up moguls depending on conditions. Valle Nevado also uses the double black diamond symbol, but not for the reasons you would expect. Instead, the resort uses this marking to denote freeride zones that are not patrolled or avalanche controlled. Some of these areas require hiking or traversing to reach, but even then, the terrain is relatively tame compared to the more challenging areas found at neighboring La Parva or on El Colorado's backside. Even the hike-to double black freeride zones rarely feel intimidating by North American standards. That all being said, skiers and riders heading off-piste should proceed with serious caution. While a few freeride areas immediately adjacent to march trails may receive occasional patrol oversight, the vast majority of off-piste terrain at Valle Nevado is neither maintained nor mitigated for avalanche risk. Snow coverage can also be quite thin, with exposed rocks, also known as sharks, lurking just beneath the surface, especially in dry spells. Finally, the canyons to the east of Valle Nevado are rather remote and treacherous, with no roads out, extremely avalanche-prone terrain, and a canyon depth of at least 2,000 feet below the ski resort base village. You should not enter this area unless you know what you're doing and know exactly where you're going. We highly recommend that anyone heading off a marked piste carry proper avalanche safety gear, including a beacon, shovel, and probe, and travel with a partner or experienced guide. But if lift and hike served off-piste isn't enough for you, Valle Nevado offers one of the best-known heli-skiing operations in the southern hemisphere. These guided outings reach elevations far beyond the resort's lift-served terrain, with drop-ins as high as 15,000 feet and vertical descents of over 6,500 feet, more than triple what's continuously skiable within the resort boundary. However, this level of access does not come cheap. A single full-day heli-skiing outing costs approximately $2,000 US, so if you want to cross heli-skiing off your bucket list while visiting Valle Nevado, you should probably start saving up. When it comes to terrain parks, Valle Nevado is home to two modestly sized freestyle areas, both situated on the lower mountain and directly served by platter lifts. These include a medium to large traditional terrain park off the Candonga surface lift and a border cross course off the Escondida surface lift. While terrain parks are not a major focus of the resort, they offer a decent selection of features, including boxes, rails, rollers, jumps, and the occasional quarter pipe contingent on seasonal snow conditions and ops bandwidth. Thanks to its high elevation and predominantly south-facing terrain, Valle Nevado generally enjoys slightly better snow preservation and accumulation than its neighbors La Parva and El Colorado. Powder quality is often excellent, and thanks to the resort's more family-oriented clientele, off-piste terrain can remain untouched for far longer than at comparable resorts in North America or Europe. It's not uncommon to find fresh tracks lingering just off the main trails for days or even weeks after a storm. That said, Valle Nevado's snowfall patterns tend to be feast or famine. The resort often built its entire seasonal base off just a handful of large storms, with extended dry spells in between. These droughts do bring ample sunshine and comfortable temperatures, but they can last weeks or even months, leaving the resort heavily reliant on snowmaking, if it can even deploy it, to keep groomed runs open. On a good day, the off-piste can offer deep and soft powder turns, but during a bad season, those same areas might be completely bare and unskiable. Valle Nevado's high alpine, highly exposed footprint has some other consequences. Given that the resort entirely lacks trees, visibility during storm skiing is not easy, although boundary poles on most runs do help a little bit. That same exposure can also bring strong winds that occasionally affect lift operations. On the plus side, the resort does operate until 5 p.m. daily. This is an hour later than the standard 4 p.m. closure time typical at most North American resorts, which offers guests a bit more time to make the most of the conditions they have. Thanks to its compact-looking trail map, above treeline footprint that allows views of nearly the entire resort, and exceptionally designed signage at least by South American standards, Valle Nevado might appear pretty easy to get around at a first glance. That said, getting around the resort requires more planning than one might expect, especially on the upper mountain backside, where many areas are only connected by surface lifts. Some of these lifts are awkwardly placed and require short hikes if you don't follow a very specific route to reach them. It also takes some flat traversing to reach the ski and ski out condos located below the main base village. While technically possible to reach on skis, it's often more convenient to take the village shuttle at the end of the day. By Chilean standards, Valle Nevado offers an exceptional lift setup featuring one of the only two high-speed quads in the country and the only gondola at a Chilean ski resort. These two lifts provide fast access to the majority of the front side, and they're supplemented by a mix of fixed grip chairs and surface lifts that offer some redundancy. That said, Valle Nevado's lift system is far from flawless. If you're not accustomed to using surface lifts, the resort's backside will be a challenge. This zone relies almost entirely on aging one-person platter lifts, many of which have surprisingly strong recoil that can, to put it lightly, catch riders off guard. These surface lifts also tend to run up relatively steep lift lines, making repeat laps physically tiring, even for experienced skiers and riders. Valle Nevado is one of the most popular ski resorts in South America, and it can get fairly busy, especially when it comes to the beginner-friendly gondola and the limited-capacity surface lifts on the upper mountain. That said, crowds are kept from becoming truly overwhelming thanks to solid lift redundancies, at least on the front side. One thing to note though, if you can, avoid getting rentals or lift tickets on Wednesday and Sunday mornings. These times coincide with the arrival of new hotel guests on Tuesday and Saturday evenings, which often leads to significant bottlenecks in both areas. When it comes to stopping for a break at Valle Nevado, which you'll probably want to do given the altitude, the resort offers a couple of options. Like with much of the resort's infrastructure, the most comprehensive services are found on the front side. In addition to the base village, which features a mix of upscale restaurants and casual food trucks, there's a mid-mountain restaurant at the top of the gondola, a range of services at the gondola base, and a food truck at the top of the Mirador lift, though this one does not have a corresponding bathroom. On the other hand, however, the backside is far more isolated. The only real service available is an outhouse bathroom located at the base of the Bahicas platter lift. Unfortunately, this facility is inconveniently placed for skiers and riders accessing other backside lifts, especially the Tres Puntas platter, where the loading area is frustratingly close from a physical perspective, but stopping in at this bathroom means dealing with an annoying sidestep climb to return to the lift. There is a ski patrol shack at the top of the Tres Puntas lift, but it doesn't include public bathrooms, and it isn't designed to function as a guest rest stop. Valle Nevado's inbound slopes may not be the most naturally distinctive in terms of terrain features, but the same certainly won't be said for its surroundings. On clear days, which, as we mentioned earlier, occur frequently, guests are treated to awe-inspiring views of the surrounding Andes, including towering peaks that rise as much as 5,800 feet above the resort's top lift-served elevation. Valle Nevado itself sits on a dramatic knife's-edge ridge, bordered by jagged cliffs that extend well below the ski area boundary. The terrain is especially visible from the Retorno Trail on the front side, where skiers and riders are treated to a sweeping view of the ridge below. It's also worth noting that Valle Nevado is one of 3 interconnected ski resorts that make up Chile's Tres Valles region, alongside La Parva and El Colorado. In fact, parts of El Colorado's backside are clearly visible from the Valle Nevado base area, and it's not uncommon for guests to mistake that terrain as part of Valle Nevado proper until they take a closer look at the trail map and boundary markings. While these 3 ski resorts have historically been independently operated, they are physically connected by skiable terrain provided the right conditions, and as a result, it's possible to ski or ride between them. Despite their interconnectivity, all 3 of these resorts are on separate tickets, and skiing or riding into La Parva or El Colorado from Valle Nevado does not necessarily mean you will have access to their lifts. However, Valle Nevado and La Parva have been under the same ownership since 2024, and as of the 2025 season, the 2 neighbors now offer a ticket add-on that allows skiers and riders to access both resorts in a single day at a discounted rate. No full Tres Valles joint pass currently exists, and Valle Nevado still maintains a separate lift ticket system from El Colorado. Valle Nevado is particularly known among Northern Hemisphere skiers for one key reason: its strong pass partnerships. It's the only South American ski resort featured on either the Icon Pass or the Mountain Collective Pass, making it a natural choice for many American and Canadian skiers visiting the Andes. Valle Nevado is also included on both the Power Pass and Power Pass Select, but unlike Icon and Mountain Collective, these days are shared and interchangeable with neighboring La Parva, allowing guests to sample terrain at both mountains under the same pass allocation. It is worth noting that for all 3 programs, direct-to-lift access is not currently available, and pass holders have to stop by the ticket window to register their access before hitting the slopes. In addition, none of these 3 programs are affiliated with El Colorado, while Icon and Mountain Collective do not include La Parva access, so pass holders looking to drop into these resorts will need to prepare to buy lift tickets. Valle Nevado is also fairly Anglophone friendly as far as ski resorts go in South America. Most staff, especially in hotels, guest services, and ski school, speak English reasonably well, and the resort caters heavily to international guests. That said, not everyone you interact with will speak fluent English, especially in operational roles like shuttle drivers or lift attendants, so it's worth knowing a few key Spanish phrases or keeping a translation app handy if you want to be able to speak to everyone. One of the biggest considerations when planning a trip to Valle Nevado is its access road. The travel time from Santiago may not look too bad on paper. It's less than 2 hours when conditions align, but the drive itself is incredibly treacherous and unlike anything found at resorts in the US or Canada. The road is narrow and extremely winding, involving dozens of hairpin turns and an elevation gain of over 7,000 feet. If inclement weather rolls through, chains are required to make it up the full way safely. When you're traveling up the access road under these conditions, you might also encounter a police checkpoint along the way, where officers verify that you're actually staying at the resort. Due to the road's difficulty and the congestion it creates, the Valle Nevado access road is converted into a one-way route on weekends and holidays, with uphill traffic only from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and downhill traffic only from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. If you're not familiar with driving in these types of conditions, and most North Americans won't be, we strongly recommend booking a shuttle from Santiago. Some taxis may offer this service, but they often lack proper winter equipment, leaving you at risk of getting stuck in a remote and dangerous mountain area. Shuttle companies like Ski Total run regular trips to the resort, though it's worth noting that drivers may not speak English all that well, and that you should explicitly remind the company in advance about how many passengers and how much gear you have, especially on the trip back down to Santiago. Vans do occasionally arrive without enough space for ski bags or large groups, unless you've clearly communicated your needs. Due to these circumstances, we highly recommend staying on site at Valle Nevado rather than attempting a day trip up from Santiago. But if you do decide to drive, Valle Nevado provides parking options for both overnight guests and day visitors. The main day lot is located at the base of the gondola, but space is somewhat limited, especially on weekends and holidays. Guests staying at on-site hotels such as Hotel Valle Nevado and Hotel Tres Puntas are offered free parking, though it's limited as well, and accommodations typically ask that you reserve a spot at least 24 hours in advance. Speaking of staying on site, the Valle Nevado experience might be catered just as much around the lodging as it is the skiing and riding. The vast majority of accommodations are managed by the resort and marketed under a cruise ship style model, where lift tickets, meals, and other core amenities are bundled into a single package. During the peak season, which is typically from early July through mid-September, this system includes fixed arrival and departure dates, with most check-ins and check-outs only permitted on Tuesdays and Fridays. As a result, most stays require a minimum commitment of 3 nights. That said, it's possible to work around these rigid booking policies if you really want to. A small number of on-site Airbnbs offer more flexible arrival and departure options throughout the week. However, if you decide to get an accommodation that does not include meals, it's worth noting that groceries and basic supplies in Valle Nevado proper are both extremely limited and incredibly expensive. As a result, we highly recommend stocking up in Santiago before heading up the mountain. Not every accommodation is directly ski in, ski out, but they are all within easy access of the slopes in a couple minutes walk at most. The village is also served by a convenient shuttle system that gets you from any accommodation to the main base. While the overall operate culture doesn't rival that of major North American or European resorts, Valle Nevado offers a decent mix of options for guests looking to unwind after a day on the slopes. Right after the slopes close, the core of the activity takes place around the base village hotels with casual food and drinks. For a more low-key indoor option, the Valle Lounge provides a fireplace setting with appetizers and drinks. Those seeking nightlife can head to Pub Tres Puntas, which features occasional live music, karaoke, and dancing, though the scene starts late for ski resort standards, typically not until 10:30 or 11 p.m. If you're looking for something that's quieter and a bit earlier, there are some bar options with wine, cocktails, or light food. So Valle Nevado isn't the most modern ski resort out there, and it's not the toughest or most consistent either. But for those looking to book a Southern Hemisphere ski trip in July or August that's included on a North American Mega Pass, Valle Nevado is pretty much the default choice, and it's a pretty decent one all things considered. The resort is a much easier journey than other icon destinations halfway around the world in New Zealand, and if you happen to hit it on a good powder day, you might just find yourself skiing or riding in some of the best inbound snow conditions of your life. If you don't visit Valle Nevado using a pass, a one-day adult lift ticket costs 89,000 Chilean pesos, which is about $94 as of May 2025. While that's relatively expensive by Chilean standards, it's still noticeably cheaper than the average day ticket at a US ski resort for what you get. That said, most guests probably won't be paying that rate, as lift tickets are typically bundled into hotel packages. One other thing to note, kids 12 and under and seniors 75 and up ski free, making Valle Nevado a very enticing offer for families and older visitors. Now let's go through how Valle Nevado stacks up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10 category mountain score. Valle Nevado gets some of the lightest and driest snow in the world when conditions line up, but raw quantity can be hit or miss depending on the season, with the resort typically getting less than 200 inches over the span of a 4-month season, and it gets a 6 for snow. Valle Nevado snowmaking ultimately keeps the resort's marked trails in decent shape throughout each season, but protracted warm and dry spells that hurt conditions regularly occur, and the resort gets a 5 for resiliency. Valle Nevado claims a footprint size of 2,224 acres, although based on our measurements, only 1,940 of these acres are skiable, getting the resort a 7 for size. Valle Nevado offers some very cool above treeline terrain, but it might start to feel relatively similar after a while, and below treeline slopes are non-existent, getting the resort a 6 for terrain diversity. Valle Nevado's hardest terrain is by no means a walk in the park, but typical advanced skiers and riders should be able to handle it at least technical-wise, and the resort gets a 5 for challenge. Valle Nevado has a very advanced lift network for Chile, but that's not saying much, and several areas are still held down by difficult-to-load surface lifts. 10% of the skiable footprint requires hiking to reach, and the resort gets a 6 for lifts. Valle Nevado has its share of choke points on busy days, although there are a fair amount of redundancies in certain areas, and the resort gets a 6 for crowd flow. Valle Nevado has adequate lodges on its front side, but stopping in from the back is somewhat more difficult, and the resort gets a 6 for facilities. Valle Nevado's narrow layout means it won't ever be the most complicated ski resort in the world to get around, but there are more flat spots than one might expect, especially on the backside, and the resort gets a 6 for navigation. And finally, mountain aesthetic. Valle Nevado offers incredible views of the surrounding Andes Mountains, and the knife's edge the town sits on is pretty cool too. And while the resort won't be designated a World Heritage Site anytime soon, it still gets a 9 in this category. These categories add up to an overall score of 62, placing Valle Nevado 4th in Chile as of May 2025. Valle Nevado is not the place to be if you want expert terrain or a reliable access road, but it holds its own for its family-friendly slopes, beautiful views, and the option to ride fast lifts, at least in some areas. And while Valle Nevado is by no means the most consistent ski resort in the world, if you land there on a good day, it might be one of the best inbounds powder experiences you'll ever have. A few other Chilean destinations are probably slightly better overall, but if you have an Icon, Mountain Collective, or Power Pass and want to ski the Southern Hemisphere, you're probably not going to go wrong. If you found this information helpful, be sure to like and subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our content. And if you want to check out what we're doing in the Northern Hemisphere this summer, check out Peak Vlog as we build out our national parks rankings and explore the best in nature that the US and Canada have to offer. For more information on Valle Nevado and over 100 ski resorts around the world, check out peakrankings.com. Special thanks to our Peak patrons, and see you for the next one.